Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. I know that on Twitter, a lot of people post like anniversaries of things that happen in Wrestling Pass, and today, honestly, was one that really affected me more than I thought it really would. 10 years ago, on this day, we had the first Money in the Bank cash-in of all time of Edge cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase that he won at WrestleMania 21 on John Cena, just moments after he competed in the Elimination Chamber at New Year's Revolution 2006. I always sort of get the times mixed up of when New Year's Revolution would be. This pay-per-view happened January 8th, 2006, but for some reason, when I always look back on that show, I always thought that was sort of like the December show, what would be TLC now. I never knew that it was actually held after January inside of the new year. And for some reason, I always thought that this cash-in took place in Puerto Rico when it actually took place in Albany, New York. Now, of all the Money in the Bank cash-ins, nothing will ever beat the first one. This was the biggest surprise of all time. Definitely when the match was thought up for the Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 21, it was said that somebody would hold this briefcase until WrestleMania and be the number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship. It did say that they could, cash in to become champion, but nobody really knew the rules, and nobody really knew how this was going to work. I really thought that this was replacing the Royal Rumble as, what would be your number one contender going into WrestleMania. I thought that this was supposed to be, a guy would hold the Money in the Bank briefcase for a year, and, then they would build this guy up to being the next big main eventer, and he would beat the champion and sort of take his place as building a new star in order to get there. I bet you, that, if you talk to wrestling fans, everyone in the world is going to say, yeah, I ordered that show. I couldn't believe it. I'll be 100% honest. I didn't order this show. I didn't watch this show. I had a dish at this time that got all the shows. For some reason, I guess I just didn't care about this show. When you look back over the whole pay-per-view as a whole, you had the chamber match with a pretty weak, main event of John Cena, Carlito, Chris Masters, Shawn Michaels, Kane, and Kurt Angle. You had a Divas bra and panties match. You had Shelton Benjamin against Viscera, Triple H against Big Show, Jerry Lawler against Gregory Helms, Trish Stratus against Mickie James, Ric Flair against Edge. Nothing really groundbreaking at this point, but I can honestly remember doing what I think a lot of people did back in the day. If you didn't have the pay-per-view, you would wait maybe about 15-20 minutes after a pay-per-view ended. You'd go over to WWE.com and you'd look at the front page, and they would sort of have the headlines of the pay-per-view, much like it is now. If you go over there after you watch Raw, you'll have a big picture of the main event angle or the main event match, and something trying to entice you to read their article about the show. That's really what it did, and I opened it up, and there was Edge with the World Heavyweight Championship, and he was posing with it, and I was just so dumbfounded. This would be 10 years ago, so I guess there was a YouTube. I honestly don't think I got on YouTube for another year or two, and I didn't know that there was anywhere that I could watch this back. I knew there was places that I could watch it live, but I really had to wait and to see the pictures the next night to see how this really went down. I remember reading the dirt sheet articles on WrestlingHeadlines.com, and I read that thing like 5 times, and I just tried to play out in my mind what it would look like when this happened, and it just was one of the most shocking things, because like I said, no one knew the rules of the Money in the Bank. It was possible that Vince McMahon and the writing crew didn't even know the rules of what was going down. They definitely needed something as a shock in the system. John Cena had ran through just about every competitor that he could on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, and he needed a shock to get him over to the next hump. Basically how it played out on the pay-per-view was that John Cena went through the Elimination Chamber and was able to overcome the odds. It came down to John Cena, Carlito, and Chris Masters. Carlito and Chris Masters, you look back on them, they're not the biggest names in professional wrestling. Honestly, if you were watching television at this time and you were following Monday Night Raw, I think that Carlito and Chris Masters were sort of looked at as like sort of like the guys of the Shield. Were looked at before Seth Rollins became the champion, before Roman Reigns headlined WrestleMania. These were like sort of like can't miss guys that you really could tell that Vince and company really liked, and they were getting a push. Chris Masters definitely was sort of green. Carlito really didn't have the size, but they really were getting the push, and you could really see something behind them. And it came down to Carlito and Chris Masters. What they should have done was just basically eliminated John Cena, and then they could have basically had a match between the two of them to see who was going to be the champion and who was going to win the chamber. But instead, they turned on each other inside of the match, and Cena was able to overcome the odds and eliminate both of them to sort of get the big win here. I don't think it was until, I believe, WrestleMania 22 that the door shut on Masters and Carlito. They were going to go for the tag championships against Big Show and Kane. I think a lot of people thought they were actually going to win because of how their push was going. But they lost the match, and they never really were ever to regain the status that they had. That looked like they were going up. You could definitely tell that they were falling. On this show, Edge lost in the opening match via disqualification to Ric Flair. Edge wasn't able to even win the Intercontinental Championship from a 2005 Ric Flair. Oh, I guess it'd be 2006. I apologize, but very, very surprising. But basically, they beat it into your head that he was the Money in the Bank briefcase holder. Ric Flair put the figure 4 on Lita. Edge came into the ring with the briefcase. He knocked Ric Flair over the head twice for the disqualification. I guess we should have seen the writing on the wall, but we didn't. And basically, Cena, once the chamber was coming up, Vince McMahon stepped out onto the stage and basically said that the pay-per-view wasn't over, and there was going to be one more match. And from that, he brought out Edge, who had won the Money in the Bank contract, and he was going to be cashing it in. He made his way down to the ring, and once he got in the ring, he said that it was on. He hit the spear twice. Cena kicked out the first time, and after the second, he wasn't able to get up. 1, 2, 3. Edge was the champion, and headlines were made all over the world that even when a show like New Year's Revolution comes out and it doesn't look that good, anything can really happen inside the WWE. The next night on Monday Night Raw, we would have Edge and Lita having a live sex celebration. I think it was a lot of people, a lot like me. Edge gets a lot of he gets a lot of the I guess you can say a lot of the praise for pushing the rating up, being one of the highest rated champions of all time. I think it was a lot of people, a lot like me, who didn't believe that Edge was the champion, didn't believe that he was going to have the belt. Maybe people thought that they were going to have a rematch, but definitely him and Lita rolled around naked in a bed on Monday Night Raw in the main event before the PG era kicked off, and everyone tuned in and everybody watched it. You can go watch the Edge documentary, and Michael P.S. Hayes basically said that Edge didn't have a lot of fans, but basically Vince, went with this. He thought it was going to work. You could tell that they didn't have long-term plans with Edge as the champion, because 3 weeks later, I knew that it was going to be a big match, but basically Edge comes out as the champion, and then John Cena gets this big, huge, dramatic entrance, a lot like a lot of guys would get for WrestleMania at the Royal Rumble 3 weeks later. The second he came down, basically on a bridge from the ceiling of the arena, I knew that he was winning. I didn't need to see the match. Edge and Cena would go on to have a huge rivalry that lasted years inside of WWE. When you think of John Cena's biggest opponents, Edge is probably right in there as one of the guys that you think that went neck and neck with him. Everybody's going to remember that TLC match that they had in Toronto. It was Edge's match. It was in Edge's hometown. Everyone thought that was in the bag, and Cena was able to overcome the odds. And even though probably Edge should have won that match, Cena gained a lot of respect from a lot of people, getting really beat up in that match, taking a lot from Edge, and Edge gave a lot to Cena in that match as well. So it was one hell of a rivalry. But I can't believe that was 10 years ago today. Edge cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase, cashing in the contract on John Cena, becoming champion for the first time and starting off one of the greatest rivalries in WWE's history. It was a fun night. Hope everybody was able to check it out. I can honestly say that I didn't watch it live, but I wish I did.